Undertale. What do you think when I say this word? Is it the funny skeleton? Is it the friends we made along the way? Is it anime? Well, you'd be right. Because one of, if not the greatest thing that this fandom has created is the indie animation series Underverse by JK. Indie animation. Can I call it that? It counts, right? However, there is one huge problem with this series. All of these characters have their own backstory and lore not covered in the series, which many people, including myself, are not familiar with when watching. But worry not, because today, your favorite multiversal traveler will be exploring each of these alternate timelines to document the backstories for characters like Ink, Error, Nightmare, and more. So hopefully by the end of this video, you're ready to watch Underverse and understand all of the characters. And if you've watched it already, you'll gain a greater understanding of the events and context. So without any further ado, let's get it. Have you ever wanted to create an AU, been inspired by some of the amazing works across the fandom, and wanted to give it a shot yourself? We all have at some point, but some don't make it all the way. This story follows as one of these unfinished AUs, a nameless AU, I'm just going to call it Inktail, is where we find our first Underverse character, Inksands by Maybe. Essentially, the Gojo of Underverse Season 1 and the protagonist of Season 2, Inksands starts off in an unfinished universe, a white void where all of the characters are barely more than ideas, sketches given form that haven't even developed emotions yet. But that's where Sans stands out. Being the only one in this universe with emotions, he grieved about his loneliness, his broken world, and his identity until one day it was too much, and either giving up or trying one last desperate attempt, he ripped apart his soul, somehow setting himself free from this forgotten world into another. Jesus, that's pretty dark. Anyway, without a soul, Sans lost his memories, emotions, and his appearance. Look at bro, he's got thighs now. But ironically, without his emotions, he is now left in the same state as the other monsters in his timeline and simply sits in the void, needing an extra push to get himself moving, or an extra splash. Wherever Sans ended up was a place where residue of emotions that AU creators felt and put into their work would splash into in the form of ink. Finally, with emotions again, Ink would use his paint to create whatever he wanted, including his iconic brush, Gaster Blasters, and life. That's a little bit concerning, actually. However, the paint was inconsistent, and he couldn't exactly control when an AU would be created. So, to ensure his emotions would never run out, he created vials to hold the ink, which he could drink whenever he wanted. After a long time in the void, a rift in space-time opened up, giving him access to the Undertale multiverse. After exploring said multiverse, Inksands has become able to interact with the creators of AUs, which is some pretty scary fourth wall feats, but then again, anyone with an Ask blog can do that. Knowing that these are the people that give him his emotions, he does his best to encourage him to create more AUs, proclaiming himself as the guardian of the multiverse. And bang! That's the official story of our favorite Underverse character. Everything after this isn't exactly canon, since the author wanted to keep this story open-ended, but after Ink was released to the wild, the fandom just ran with him, using him in crossovers, fanfiction, and the like, many of which are implied to happen in Underverse, which most people assume is canon anyway. So, what's happened after the official story? Well, the void he spawned in after killing himself became the Doodle Sphere, a place which connects all the timelines together through gateways, which can only be accessed by Ink, which actually is canon according to Maybe, and uses it as his base of operations as he traveled to hundreds of Undertale timelines. I don't know what these papers are. Are they portals, connections, representations of AUs? There's no mention of it within the backstory, but going forward, it seems like the fandom has treated these papers as representations of the timelines themselves. I don't know for sure, but in Underverse, that's how they're treated, so that's just how I'm going to assume they are. He also traveled to Underswap, befriending Underswap Sans. Eventually, on his travels, met his lifetime rival Error Sans. Don't worry, we'll get to him. I haven't found an official meeting comic or anything, but if you guys have the comic where Ink and Error meet for the first time, let me know. I want to see that shit. But in Underverse, the two have been fighting back and forth so much to the point that at the literal start of Underverse, the two come to a truce, no creation and no destruction. Some other things worth mentioning about Ink before watching Underverse is he baths up Ink whenever he's too excited and has short-term memory. None of this is explained in the story, just common knowledge for the fandom, and is a staple for any AU or fanfic he's in since his creation 10 years ago. I think it gives him personality though. Also, when watching this one scene of him with Fresh and Ink, I thought they were just blabbing, but after watching this, I can now understand it a bit more. I don't know why I put this in, I just thought it was cool. But yeah, it's no exaggeration to say that Ink Sans represents the entire Undertale fandom as a whole, and this is even shown in his backstory. He's not just a creation of the fandom within the story, but a story like this can only exist because the Undertale multiverse is so big because we keep creating AUs. It's a story about creating AUs and the emotions, struggles, and triumphs that come with it. Not only that, he represents the community in the smaller details too. Like in Inktail, Sans was the most developed, being the only one with emotions and one of the few with a full body, since he's the most popular character. So of course, it's likely that this creator would have had more ideas and been more excited to create the Sans. He lives off the creations of the multiverse and goes around encouraging others to add to the multiverse. I don't know, he just feels like the perfect love letter and representation of this community. And he was made 10 years ago. We've gotten bigger and better since then. Like, do you think Ink Sans ever met Last Breath Sans? Anyway, in the end, amazing Sans, amazing story, surprisingly deep story, yet very easy to follow and understand. Now, let's see if his counterpart can live up to these expectations. Error Sans. Is it just me, or is the official version and the Underverse version like two separate characters? Created by Crayon Queen, this guy is essentially the god of destruction of the Undertale multiverse, going around destroying timelines that he doesn't like. Error Sans has a whole backstory blog, but after reading it, I found out that Error Sans is AFTERTALE Sans. But like, this is all the confirmation that we get of it. It doesn't affect his character, it doesn't affect his story. There isn't a whole lot of clues that point towards it within the blog, and it doesn't really change anything. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna cover AFTERTALE at the end of this video and try not to spoil it during this section, because right now it is my favorite AU of all time, possibly the greatest. So I'm gonna save it to the end and talk about everything that happened since the inception of Error Sans, mostly. It sounds like there was some posts or whatever, but I'm just going off of the blog and posts following the cancellation of the blog. So first off, AFTERTALE Sans is a Sans who got determination, and so while messing around with these determination powers, he accidentally sends himself into the Anti-Void, a place between time and space where there's no sound, no people, no bitches, and no way out. After a long time in this Anti-Void, AFTERTALE Sans begins to glitch out, his colors invert and his mind is corrupted, memories fading, and the hatred and frustration he felt being trapped away for so long is engraved into his mind. Now in a new form, he was just stuck there. He sleeps for a bit, but when that gets too boring, he starts screaming for help, and when that didn't work, from some stroke of luck, he was able to create a portal out, teleporting into a random timeline with no memories, no idea where he is, and no idea who he is. Which, you know, is why the AFTERTALE stuff doesn't matter that much. However, after being in the Anti-Void, which is essentially sensory deprivation, and being shot into Snowden, Error Sans have a panic attack from what I can only assume is a form of sensory overload, but quickly composes himself next to the ruined door. He tries to get a grasp on things, but is quickly interrupted by this timeline's Toriel, mistaking him for her Sans. Finally having someone to talk to, he starts pretending to be her Sans, having a nice conversation with her for a bit, before heading back to the Anti-Void. I guess bro just wants that sensory deprivation life now. Every now and again, Error does come back to this timeline to talk with Toriel, until one day she mentions the human. Error doesn't have an answer for her, so worried about the human, Toriel leaves, confronting Error, who she now understands is not her Sans, while Error now understands that she isn't his Toriel. It seems Error does have some vague memories of the timeline he's from, since when seeing Toriel as a ghost, he freaks out, saying that this isn't how it's supposed to be, and asking where his Toriel went. Did you not know that this wasn't your timeline? With the last piece of home and familiarity revealed to be alien to him, his hatred and frustration flares up, causing him to glitch out and wires to extend from his eye sockets as he pulls them out, and what happens next isn't revealed to us, but it's pretty implied that now his hatred and frustration are set on timelines that are unfamiliar to him, leading Error to destroy any of these timelines he comes across, starting with this one. A lot of what happens after this is implied, but what I know for sure is that along with destroying timelines within the multiverse, he brought back souls from these worlds that he found interesting as puppets. He often frequents the Fell universe in order to take shit and throw his rubbish back. He often frequents AFTERTALE because of the sites, but doesn't or can't kill them because they're too popular. Now, through traveling the multiverse, he came across two very important characters that we'll go more in depth on later. Frisk, who saved an Undyne that Error was trying to erase, and Underfresh, a parasite that Error absolutely absolutely hates. Somewhere down the line within this time frame, Error started to hear voices. These are either figments of his imagination or creators of the multiverse that interact with the characters. The whole fourth wall part of the Undertale multiverse is very confusing to me, like Ink encouraging creators to create AUs and Error-sans talking to the creators on and off. So I'm just gonna assume that they're in his head for now. After all this, Error is going through the multiverse and eventually comes across Underswap. He meets Underswap Papyrus, but instead of destroying him, whatever memories Error did have begin to flare up. Visions of his brother cause him to glitch out. Unable to hurt Papyrus, instead capturing Sans and taking him hostage to the Anti-Void. At this point, the events of the Ask Error blog happen, so Error's just talking to the voices in his head. They count to him, they understand, they talk to him. Eventually, he tells them all the lore I taught you, and hearing about the Underswap stuff, they ask to see Swap Sans. Error brings him out, and together they continue the Ask Error blog. Well, Error does. Swap Sans can't hear him, so either they are voices in his head or only outcode characters can interact with the creators, I think. Anyway, Swap Sans tries to befriend him, but upon realizing that Error Sans has his human soul, he tries to save them from Error, which he does, dragging them both into another Anti-Void, and well, this is where the story ends. Well, the comic part of it anyway. Crayon Queen was doing 3 comics at the same time and chose to go all in on AFTERTALE instead of Error Sans, which, hear me out, was a good idea. So, the rest of Error's lore was told to us by posts after the fact, so I'll just go over what I found. After yonks of being stuck in the Anti-Void, Swap Sans gets the Error treatment and turns into Blueberry. Blueberry was Swap Sans' fandom name, so Blueberry. Honestly, looks sick. I don't know how I haven't seen this guy before, especially it being part of the official Error Sans story. Unlike Error, Swap Sans wasn't crashing out when he was glitching out, bars, so he doesn't have any hatred or frustration to be engraved in him. Instead, being a chill guy, but just a little weird, a little quirky. The animatronics get a little quirky at night. After being freed, Blueberry heads to the Omega timeline and actually befriends people there. The Omega timeline is where refugees of destroyed timelines go after being rescued by Frisk. Now, throughout the recap, there was a small detail that I didn't mention because it wasn't important yet. The voices in his head were asking Error if there were any more Errors like him. And up until Blueberry, he didn't know about any, but in the shadows, a pair of Error characters were plotting something. Error Undyne and Error Papyrus. Eventually, Error Sans and Error Undyne interact. However, in seeing Error Sans' glasses, Undyne believes that they belong to Alphys and that he did something to her, so she starts crashing out, which, to be fair, with the amount of timelines Error Sans destroyed, he definitely did fuck up an Alphys counterpart at some point. Anyway, she starts destroying everything, like everything. So Blueberry tries to convince Error to get involved to take her out, which he eventually does. And in the end, it takes the combined efforts of everyone in the Omega timeline and Error Sans to take out Error Undyne. And yeah, that's the Error story. Overall, very nice. I see how this guy became so popular in the fandom. But also, I don't see, because it seems like there was some demand for this blog to happen in the first place. So whatever posts or things that Crayon Queen created beforehand, I just wasn't around at the time to see. The earliest things I could find were these posts, but apart from that, I don't know. In terms of Underverse, I don't even know. It feels like the two are completely different characters. The one in Underverse being much more serious, put together, and powerful, while this guy, he's kind of a bum. He's a silly little goof, and we love him for that. But to be honest, I do prefer the God of Destruction type Error Sans from Underverse. Not to say he doesn't have his quirky moments, but I don't know. That's just me. But anyway, if you've made it this far, I just want to ask that you like the video. I put a lot of effort into these, and your support would go a long way in ensuring that they're successful. So now, let's go on to our next Underverse character. After the most popular duo in the series, the next most important characters are the brothers Nightmare and Dream. Created by Joku, who did some Drake shit, some Shay shit, some EDP shit, blah blah blah. I don't know what they did, but this is the trigger warning for their document. Holy shit. Post in the description. Be wary. But let's get into the comic. Are these all gonna be comics? So, the story takes place at the start of the multiverse, where 3 universes hold 3 trees, which connect to every timeline. Makes things pretty easy for that multiverse timeline I'm planning. Each of these 3 trees embodies one of life, magic, and feelings respectively for all of the universes. each tree having a guardian, but apparently the trees had beef. At some point, the life tree's guardian sent an assassin after the feelings tree. Yo, can we get some more mature guardians, bro? Y'all are beefing to death while guarding the feelings of the entire multiverse, bro. Anyway, the guardian and the tree are fatally wounded, so the guardian concocts a plan to fuse with the tree to save both of their lives, but not wanting to leave the tree unguarded, before her death, she creates 2 guardians, Dream and Nightmare. Since the tree had positive apples and bad apples, I guess she had to create a guardian for each. So she gives them each a body inspired by swap sands before fading into the tree. After this, life begins to form around the tree. Maybe the life guardian's doing, but it doesn't explain how, but it does say everything changed for the worse. So I guess that's what the guardian had planned. Anyway, with the humans here now, Dream was able to live in harmony with the people, but who would have guessed they were scared of Nightmare and were always picking on him, since he was antisocial, shy, protecting the bad apples, and was literally named Nightmare. Why would you name him Nightmare? They say labels affects how kids are viewed and viewed themselves. Bro, the guardian of feelings couldn't feel how humans would feel about a guardian named Nightmare. Anyway, after yonks of bullying, Nightmare finally snapped. So in a desperate attempt to prove himself as a good guy, he went to one of the good apples and promised to protect it, instead turning it into a bad apple. What were you even expecting to accomplish here? Just taking an apple and putting it in your pocket? I don't know. Anyway, the guardian of negativity not only turned one apple bad, but the entire tree. Look at this shit. It's completely gone, bro. I don't even... What the fuck? Why did you create guardians that would fuck up the tree? Dream and the rest of the villagers found out, and they were pissed. The villagers were, not Dream. He could never hurt Dream. But yeah, the villagers were gonna kill bro, so in order to defend himself, Nightmare decided to eat the bad apple, turning him into this. Now that's Nightmare. Anyway, so the plan worked. Nightmare absolutely decimated the villagers coming after him, at the cost of his morals, sanity, and feelings. Dream, desperate to save his brother, pulled out the last good apple he had stashed away, but quickly realized it would get corrupted too. Nightmare, completely absorbed by the negative feelings, attacks his brother, wanting to rid the multiverse of positive feelings forever by destroying that apple. At the last second, however, Dream was able to absorb the apple, powering himself up and protecting the apple within himself. Despite this, he was unable to defeat Nightmare, and so, wanting to take out the apple before destroying it, for some reason, if you just destroyed Dream, I'm pretty sure the soul, which is the apple, would be destroyed too, but okay. Nightmare turned Dream to stone. He can do that, but now he had no way to take out the soul. Yo! I didn't realize Nightmare was a fucking idiot, bro. Holy. Anyway, now that the apples were either all corrupted or inside of the Guardians, Nightmare destroyed the tree and now travels the multiverse, harvesting negative emotions from their inhabitants, while Dream is slowly being brought back by the Guardian of Magic. Bro is the Guardian of Magic and it still took you 494 years to bring back Dream? Anyway, now that Dream is finally free, they go out searching for their brother, encountering beings like Ink Sands and Frisk, befriending them along the way. Meanwhile, Nightmare encounters beings like Killer Sands, Dust Sands, and Horror Sands, recruiting them as the Murder Time Trio to continue to spread misery and create negative emotions. And there we go! Dreamtale, everybody! You know, considering how dumb Nightmare is in this story before and after corruption, he's another character that I think is done better in Underverse. But this time, I don't feel bad about liking the other one more. But yeah, a fairy tale-ish story. It's pretty good. It's pretty simple. I don't know what the fuck it has to do with Undertale, but honestly, that's fine. It doesn't matter. I feel like this all could have been avoided if the Guardian had just created one Guardian, one replacement Guardian. But oh well, you know what? I'm not going to blame the girl who got betrayed and locked in the hyperbolic time tree. So let's talk about a creator's work who isn't a freaky fucking fucker. Okay, our next three are one-off characters that are mostly very important to the series, except for one who literally only shows up for one episode. Starting off with Frisk, their story starts in an infinite pacifist timeline loop. Getting a lot of those today. When Sans eventually catches on to what is happening, so once on the surface, they take Frisk and shortcut them to the core, dropping them in to ensure that their happy ending is permanent. Like Gaster falling into the void, Frisk is completely erased from this timeline, but unlike with Gaster, they try to reset while in the void. So their soul is not only scattered across time and space within the timeline, but the entire multiverse. And yeah, that's their lore. Couldn't find a comic book or any media for it, but this is the explanation. They found the Omega timeline while they were traversing the multiverse and decided to claim it as their own, using it as a place to house inhabitants of the multiverse whose timelines were corrupted in some way, with a bunch of doors leading them from timeline to timeline. They also come across Ink and Error, befriending Ink and essentially cleaning up after Error, rescuing any victims of him that they can. When they teleport from timeline to timeline, they don't actually, you know, teleport. Since they were scattered across the entire multiverse, they exist everywhere, I think, on some omnipresent thing. So whenever they appear somewhere, they are simply creating a body for them to inhabit before erasing it. But yeah, pretty cool, pretty simple, pretty iconic. What you see is what you get, and what you get is pretty cool. Then there's Fresh Sans. Honestly, my goat. Inspired by Dippy Fresh from Gravity Falls, their lore is also pretty simple. They're a parasite which infected a Sans. He travels the multiverse to find hosts. He met Ink, he met Error, and he met a bunch of other Underverse guys. But for some reason, they're all just cool with him infecting these Sanses. Well, except for Error. He fucking hates them most of the time. So there's no backstory as of yet, but one of his canon events is a roleplay that happens yonks ago and doesn't really change much, so I'm not going to recap it. Basically, he's emotionless and can only feel fear because their whole thing is to not die. So to survive for as long as they can, they infect others and spread their 90s R virus.
It's the 90s.
Through researching this guy, I found something called Lucidia. So Error, Fresh, and AFTERTALE were all created by Crayon Queen, and whatever Lucidia is where Fresh's backstory is going to be revealed, but it also involved Error Sans and isn't even started yet, so I'm not going to get into that. Dope guy, dope cameo in AFTERTALE, and now for the final of the 3, Fatal Error Sans. Well, that's gonna have to wait, because just like Error Sans, Fatal Error is an alternate version of the Sans from AFTERTALE. Originally, I wasn't gonna talk about this one, but after reading the comic, dog, I've never been so close to crying at an Undertale AU before. And this AU is included in Season 2 of Underverse, so it'll make that part make much more sense. But out of everything we've covered today, and hell, everything on this entire channel, this is the AU that I would encourage, no, plead that you go read yourself. Read in quotations, because it's so easy to follow. Most of the AUs I cover on this series can be watched, read, or listened to after hearing my explanation with no changes, or even need someone to explain it to be understood. But this AU, it's the best story I've experienced from the Undertale fandom so far, with plot twists, character motivations, and insane resolutions that I would literally be spoiling for you. I even put the AFTERTALE part at the end, so if you left, it would hurt the video less. So please, if you haven't already, check it out in the link in the description. But if you've already read it or can't be bothered to read, then here we go. This timeline starts at the very beginning of Undertale. Frisk falls down, and upon waking up, they are greeted by Kara. Instead of being a passive narrator, Kara interacts with Frisk, helping them achieve a true pacifist ending. Frisk enjoyed this so much that they decided to do it again, starting an infinite loop of pacifist runs. Here's your pacifist roots, you filthy animal. Eventually, the duo get bored of this. In the next reset, believing that if they kill anyone, they can just, well, reset and bring everyone back. So in the next run, they start their first genocide run. Sans, distraught from his brother's death, heads to the True Lab and grabs an overly sized determination syringe and injects himself with it, hoping to gain control of this timeline once the human dies, but it doesn't work. Sans was able to reach the menu screen, but unfortunately didn't have enough determination to interact with it. Quickly, the human loaded their save, and Sans was brought back to the Judgment Hall. The fight continues, but despite Sans' determination, he was unable to defeat the human, so eventually, Sans was defeated, walking off screen and slowly fading out. However, in his last moments, as he was fading out, he thought of a way to save himself. If he could make it back to the save screen, maybe he could do something. And so he did, and it worked. Transported to a place where time stops moving, Sans survived, perpetually on the brink of death, but also unable to leave and unable to interact with the world anymore. Meanwhile, Frisk had figured out that Kara was up to something bad, so before reaching Asgore, they reset, but then still performed their infinite genocide routes. Bro, if you think Kara's gonna do something, then why are you doing another genocide route? Anyway, with the reset, since Sans was still alive, the Sans on the next reset was left with only the parts of the soul that had been faded, which luckily enough was most of it. But now, this old Sans, now called Geno Sans, was stuck watching the duo repeat genocide route once, twice, and a third time, until eventually something changed. Through each reset, Geno had been trying to figure out a way to bring someone here since he couldn't affect anything on his own. And finally, on the third reset, it had worked. He was able to bring a Sans to the save screen and explain everything that was going on, trying to recruit the Sans to join in the effort to defeat the human. But whether it was seeing the state that determination would bring Sans, his normal nihilism, or some other thing, Sans refused, explaining that there was no point and there was no way they could beat the human. And so, back Sans went. Geno watched on as the human completed another genocide route and killed them, resetting, and so Geno had another opportunity to convince Sans to join. He tweaked what he said, tried different methods to make him listen, and eventually lied to him, telling him that Kara was going to end the timeline forever if he didn't help. However, over and over, reset upon reset, the Sanses would give up, lose faith in Geno, or just fail altogether. Before long, Geno gave up too. Realizing that this wasn't working, he was eventually about to leave the save screen, finally letting himself fade out. However, they remembered Papyrus and realized that they would be stuck in this endless loop themselves. And so, in order to protect Papyrus from this loop, they devised a plan. They were going to end the timeline forever. However, when telling Sanses about this plan, he became a lot more proactive. But instead of helping, they would try to stop Geno. To get around this, Geno would continue lying, reset upon reset. He would try to get them to his side until one faithful reset where everything would change. Through the infinite resets, Kara's influence over Frisk would grow more and more until it finally got to the point where they could get Frisk to kill Asgore, finally completing the genocide run and allowing Kara to take full control of the body on some Dusttail shit. With no body left to go to, Frisk was sent to the save screen where Geno was waiting. Ready to get his revenge for everything, Geno was about to open fire when he realized this was the final key he needed for his plan, leading us finally to the events of the AFTERTALE comic. The main Sans we follow fights Kara in the Judgment Hall, of course, fails as normal, but after the resets, they get a nightmare of the fight, which just occurred. However, it changes nothing at first. The timeline goes on as normal, well, mostly normal. Sans gets another nightmare, and Papyrus catches on that something is wrong, urging Sans to explain, and eventually, Sans gives in. After hearing about the nightmares, Papyrus tells him that maybe they should ask the human, and so Sans does this, and Kara folds under absolutely no pressure. Yeah, good job, bro. What did that get you, Kara? Anyway, Kara resets again, and Sans is brought to the save screen. Geno and Frisk present themselves, and Geno starts lying again, telling him that Kara will erase the universe after this route, which, honestly, this is the first pacifist route they're doing since the start of the genocides, so they could be going for the failed pacifist route. So they genuinely might erase the universe. But anyway, Geno tells Sans that they can talk in his dreams. So, halfway through the next timeline, Sans dozes off and meets up with Geno again. He explains his whole backstory, and eventually, Sans wants to have a word with Frisk. They go through their backstory too, but at the end, Geno figures out that Kara is about to kill Papyrus, so he's about to send him back, but before Sans leaves, Frisk tells him not to trust Geno. Back at the timeline, Sans was too late to save Papyrus, so after killing Kara, they reset, bringing Sans back to the save screen to confront Geno about what Frisk said. Frisk was restrained for blowing Geno's cover, and he finally comes clean to Sans about his plan, and of course, Sans refuses. Though, instead of sending Sans back with no memories, because Geno can do that apparently, he allows Sans to keep them in order to remember every reset until he finally breaks and joins Geno on his plan. Which he nearly does. The infinite genocides continuing until Sans finally snaps. However, Papyrus is able to bring him back to his senses and gives Sans an idea. If Papyrus can help Sans through such a tough situation, surely they can do the same with Geno. So, pretending to follow through with Geno's plan, Sans brings Kara to him, but at the last minute, holds on to Papyrus, taking him too. Luckily, Sans' plan works out. Papyrus is able to convince Geno to change, everyone is able to convince Kara to give up, and they give Frisk back control so they can do one final pacifist run. Now, the only issue, get Geno out of the save screen, which they somehow figure out is just giving him a butterscotch pie as he enters the water again. That's kind of silly the more you think about it. I don't know why, but at this frame, I could just feel the tears welling up, man. Like, damn. I don't know why, but yeah, that's AFTERTALE. Anyway, now that we've got that done, the final character of the video, Fatal Error. Created by Zydramon. Luckily enough, we have another comic book backstory for this guy, so off we go. Believe it or not, we start with Error Sans, having been told by the voices in his head, us, about AFTERTALE, he decides to investigate it himself. How would the voices know about AFTERTALE if they didn't have outside knowledge? Maybe the voices are actually fourth wall. It doesn't matter. He shows up in AFTERTALE and finds Geno before the events of the AFTERTALE story. They get into an altercation in which erorr low-key beats his ass and reprimands him for being the worst glitch that he's ever met in his life. Does he know? Erorr deletes him and moves on, but unbeknownst to him, Geno survived, barely. Can you call this surviving? Bro is not thriving. He wakes up in a void, which is either what's left of his AU after erorr was finished with it, or some other thing. He starts tweaking the fuck out over everything, valid, and accidentally transports himself into an AFTERTALE timeline. One of the perks of being fucked up by erorr means he can see code in everything. Little ones and zeros make up everything he looks at, including his counterparts and his brother. Whenever he talks, I can't help but hear the from Underverse now. For a second, he mistakes AFTERTALE Papyrus for being his own brother before tweaking out and somehow teleporting himself into Blueberry's prison from the Ask Error blog. Fatal Error blacks out and Swap Sans gives him a blanket. When Fatal finally wakes up, Swap tries to befriend him, being the only person he's talked to in forever, and eventually they hit it off. Swap Sans' code reminds Fatal of Papyrus, so he enacts a plan to recreate Papyrus by stealing code from Swap Sans' across the multiverse. This Swap Sans, however, having been stuck there for yonks, doesn't want him to leave, leading to an altercation. Holy fuck, man. I tell you what, Zydramon did a really good job at making this guy intimidating. Anyway, time goes by. Chaos, I guess Fatal just spooked Swap and left. And we cut back to Fatal after harvesting a bunch of code, using the harvested code that he's got throughout the years, trying to create a new Papyrus. Meanwhile, Gasta, who I assume was the same one giving him shit in the original AFTERTALE, tries to convince him to stop using Swap Sanses and start using real Papyruses. Fatal refuses because, well, it's his brother, but is interrupted by some other shenanigans going on in his timeline, another timeline, I'm not really sure. See, during this altercation with Gasta, on the other side of the multiverse, Ink had noticed one of his timelines had gotten completely corrupted. Or maybe this was Fatal's AFTERTALE timeline. It's not ever confirmed or denied or explained, but regardless, Ink goes to check it out, finding this mess, according to erorr. He continuously denies that this was him, leading to me having a few theories as to what's going on here, but it's never explained, so your guess is as good as mine. Erorr and Ink's conversation is interrupted by this universe's Sans, who Erorr absolutely nukes, but to no avail, causing Erorr to feel the shit from wherever the hell he is. So he pulls up, meeting his old enemy. Erorr doesn't seem to remember who the hell this guy is, really putting into question what happened when Erorr tried to erase him, while Fatal Erorr absolutely remembers this guy and starts putting the brakes on him to the point that he retreats, absolutely terrified. After this, I think the events of Underverse take place, maybe even before this, since Ink doesn't seem to recognize him during the series. But this video is already long enough as it is. If you couldn't tell, my throat is absolutely fucked. So all you need to know for Underverse is that he's a Geno Sans who got corrupted by erorr Sans and can now see code. Overall, pretty banger of an AU. Can be very confusing and hard to follow in places, but that seems to be a feature, not a bug. I don't know how to feel about that, to be honest. But anyway, at least this one had a full comic, unlike stuff like Fresh Sans and Core Frisk, and was very well made. Well, guys, I hope this helped you understand Underverse a little bit more, whether you have or haven't watched it already. That's all the outcode characters that were included in Underverse. Ever since I watched this series, I've wanted to know all these guys' lore, so I'm glad I finally made this video. What's an outcode character? In the simplest terms, it's basically a character that acts outside of the multiverse through their own means. For a video on the non-outcode characters, in-code characters, normal AU characters, check out this video, and if you haven't already, go watch Underverse.